Will, I want to jump right in. We've got two pitch decks going on today. And Will, let's give everybody just a quick treat in terms of how we're going to respond and react. I want to get us to the point where, like we talked about in the beginning, founders are getting this experience of how the investor sees your pitch deck right off the bat. And it's no mark against the founder. You can improve. We're giving you this feedback because you'd rather get that from us,
Yeah,
Will,
yeah.
than an investor.
Yeah, and look, I think for a lot of folks, the misunderstanding about how a deck is going to get digested is that someone's going to read it, right? Like, oh, hold on. Someone's not going to read my deck? Doesn't make any sense. That's literally what my deck is there for. They're going to scan your deck if you're lucky. If you're like Ed and I, who go through hundreds, if not thousands of decks at any given time, we can tell you, Ed, I'm sure I'm speaking for you when I say this, we can parse through a deck in about 30 seconds
Yeah.
and get a general idea of what it is. But when the founder thinks about it, they're like, no, you're going to need like a half hour. Like, you better go make some coffee. You better get a fire going. You better just sit in your easy chair and wait for this novel that I have. No one's interested in that. What I'm dying for is the shortest, fastest explanation of what this thing does so I can move on to questions.
And not only that, Will, it's not like I have my checkbook right there beside me or my fingers hovering over the Venmo to send you your 500K. It really is, as you said, I love the way that you put it. We are trying to make a sorting decision. It's not a yes. It's going to be a no or a maybe. And that's what you want to get to, is that maybe.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. And look, because of that, I know the deck we're about to look at, I did scan and I was like, oh man, this is a good idea, but it's really dense. It's really heavy. I'm even looking at the very first page, which should be almost no words at all. And we're already starting into narrative. Every word is your enemy on a pitch deck. Every extra word is your enemy. And we're trying to make this thing as light as possible.
I really like the way that you said that. You ripped off the Band-Aid saying every word is your enemy. I am going to keep saying that over and over again. That's a new Will axiom.
It's all yours.
I'm gonna get. You are absolutely right. So here we've got Cula Narratives. I hope I'm saying that right. And it says right up front, like there's literally a pitch right on the cover page here. It says, we are an AI-driven hybrid IP studio creating global franchises across web series, books, audiobooks, interactive chatbots, building original IP like true dinosaurs that inspires studios of all sizes. Will, let's just rip off the Band-Aid again. As an investor, you see a cover like this. What are you thinking?
Well, I'll give them this. They did actually explain what they do, right?
Yeah.
I would love that in 8 words. An AI-driven hybrid IP studio. No one knows what that means.
Sure.
Okay. What the hell is a hybrid IP studio, right? Again, but let me point this out because this happens in every single deck that we see. The founder knows exactly what that means. And the founder might go so far as to say, well, I'm about to explain to you what it means. You get to use terminology, acronyms, things like that, once you have an opportunity that you know you're going to be in front of the investor. Until then, assume the investor knows nothing and feed them like they are a 5-year-old with the most basic information that anybody would easily understand. If you're using phrasing in there that people would not understand, it's got to come out. We got to keep this simple.
Will, I was in a boardroom with an investor, and he represented a lot of investors just last week. We were down. We got to spend some time together. It was in Ohio. It was a great time. The founder said, we're a studio, and this triggered this conversation. He said, this founder was responsible for building a network television station up to $3 billion. This investor and sort of, the general partner. And he said, I don't like the word studio. And we all kind of jammed on it. And he said, you don't understand what the word studio means in Hollywood. Everybody's a studio. Don't say you're a studio. And we were like, oh, that's really interesting because that's what studio means to us. And I think that harkens to what you're saying, Will, is let's just be clear in terms of what you do on the cover so you don't run into potentially tripping something in the investor's mind that confuses them or creates more friction that doesn't need to be there.
Right, exactly. And the whole thing is simplicity and brevity. The more basic the pitch is, the better the pitch is every single time.
And Will, in your opinion, why do founders overload slides like this?
Because there's 2 reasons. Number one, they haven't been challenged to say it in fewer words. They assume they have as much room as they want, right? And given no restrictions, as you're going to see in this deck, you're assuming that everyone's going to read everything. The second reason is because they're so fearful that if they leave something out, that the investor's not going to want to buy, right? So let's tell them everything. Let's not tell them the one thing we do. Let's tell them the 90 things that we do. Because if there's 90 things, they're going to be even more excited. Polar opposite of how this works. Yes. And again, I think at first blush for most founders, that would make sense. But in practice, it's really confusing for the audience.
I'll tell you straightforward, Will. I see something like this and it's got so many concepts. I don't have any expectation for this deck. Like, you're starting in the hole for me. And that's precisely what you did not want to do. But let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Let's continue looking. So here's your problem. Original sci-fi IP is rare. Hollywood recycles, indie studio can't scale, and global fans crave fresh, bingeable, high-quality cinematic content across formats. And you got a whole bunch of bullet points.
Here's the problem. I feel like this is kind of generic, okay? In other words, saying that Hollywood recycles isn't new information.
Sure.
It's not powerful information. Gen Z viewers want original cross-platform stories. No shit. Right? Indie creators lack, massive visual effects budgets. Of course they do, right? Like, in other words, you haven't made me go, oh, really? That's interesting. You also haven't told me how much money is on the table.
Right.
I need to know that there's $400 billion, I'm making up a number, being lost because somebody's doing this. Or that currently moviegoer content audiences are spending $300 billion on this. None of this tells me where the money is on the table. It just tells me that people want content that's not a reboot. It's not powerful.
This falls into that category where all this is an opinion, and then all this as well. For example, here's what I would argue, because, I spent some time in this circle. It's like Hollywood recycles, so they're all reboot sequels. Well, as far as I'm concerned, the latest reboot or sort of reimagining was Lilo and Stitch by Disney. And that's on the verge of making like $1 billion, right? So why is that a problem? Why would we even want to solve it? This is, like you said, generic, and it's very opinionated, and that doesn't help an investor. Saying something's broken. Oh my gosh, this so-and-so industry is broken, and it sucks right now. I saw a pitch deck today. Social media sucks. It's like, according to whom? And like, you haven't given me anything to say this is a problem I want to solve.
Right. So the other problem is we didn't get far enough into the weeds of this company's problem. You just described all of Hollywood's problem. In other words, what problem are we specifically going to solve? My guess is the aperture of this problem is just too wide right now. So it's making it really hard for me to say, oh my God, we got to solve that immediately.
I'm going to ask this question again, Will. Why do founders do this? There are literally like 8 problems on this slide, and they're all generic. Why do founders do that?
They do it because in most cases, in my experience, and I'm guessing that you'd see the same, they're afraid that if they don't list everything, that they're going to get dinged, if you will, for the idea not being good enough. And it's like, look, if you're good enough at the first thing that you do or the first problem that you solve, you're good. The fact that you solve 7 more other things doesn't really matter. And let me be more specific. If you're not the best at solving the first thing, the fact that you solve 7 more isn't going to save you. I'll give you a good example. If you build a shitty car, the fact that you have the best heated seats is not going to save you, right? The features aren't going to save you. It's the fact that you build a great car, and that's what people need. So I always come back to, let's definitely focus on what you do best and focus the argument and the problem and the solution there.
In fact, the more problems you solve, the less of a chance you have at being good at any one of them.
Right.
But also, to use your example, Will, what if we said, well, there are 500 million cars with 500 million drivers that want heated seats and nobody has, made them? Well, then you could solve for that. So just make sure your problem and your solution, the problem that you're trying to solve and your solution lines into it.
100%.
Which is a segue. You want to talk about overloaded slides? Well, right away, here's the solution slide. I'm not even going to read this. And I'm going to pause for a moment. Will, this founder, man, he's so happy to be part of Startups.com. He's one of the most gracious, respectful, grateful founders that we know. So please, to this founder, we're not throwing you under the bus. We're just saying, hey, let's give you the actual straight goods. And this founder, to their credit, said, just roast me. Like, rip it apart. I said, I can send you this feedback privately. No, I want to have Will and Ed do it right on YouTube. So we appreciate that.
All right. No, I respect that. You know what? I also respect, honestly, someone's willingness to be able to stand out there. So it also speaks volumes for the founder. Before I even read this is telling a story. This is a narrative. This is the kind of copy you put in maybe a landing page or a brochure for a product. This format, what we're presenting as a pitch deck, is neither of those formats, okay? The best comparable that I can use for how you should think about writing copy for every one of your slides, write copy as if you think you're writing for a billboard. Back in the day when I was growing in my career 30 years ago, I ran a large ad agency. And back then, we still had outdoor media that was, more popular, and that was part of what we did. We did a lot of media, most of the internet. But anyway, and when we'd write for billboards, for outdoor media ad, The general rule of thumb is you get 6 words. 6 words are the most number of words Ed can look up at on the highway and digest and make sense of, ideally less. And when we talk about pitch decks, I want you to think about it, audience, in the same way. I want you to think about it as not literally 6 words. You get a few more words, but I'll give you the boundaries I'm going to give you are you get 1 sentence, maybe 2. That's it. You 1 sentence, some bullet points. That's it. The reason for that, there's a bunch of them. I'm going to give you the biggest ones. The reason, no one is going to read. Ed, if you will, flip back to that slide, that problem slide.
Solution or problem?
Solution, sorry. Find me 1 human on the planet that can read all of that and recite it. Ed, I'm not gonna put you on the spot today to ask you to read that and close your eyes and recite it. I'm fairly confident that the number of people that can actually do that are not investors.
Right.
There's some circus academics somewhere. I say this to say what I need as an investor is I need the shortest synopsis of what this is. The shortest synopsis is going to be 1 sentence that says, see that problem in the previous slide? This solves it. Does this solution solve the problem of all entertainment sucking?
Man, I was going to just point that out right away. And this was my initial feedback. So for all of you wondering what Will's talking about, let's go all the way back to the cover. Okay. So we're saying we're an AI-driven hybrid IP studio creating global franchise. Okay. And we're building original IP like true dinosaurs and inspire studios of all sizes. Okay. Then we came up with a problem and we went right into Hollywood's broken. All these, studios are recycling content.
Right.
Gen Z wants something else, et cetera. And our solution is a story about dinosaurs. and, I'm being very reductive and facetious, but I'm just illustrating how we got totally derailed from the narrative. And I challenged this founder, Will, in the beginning. I said, are you trying to just sell a show for dinosaurs? Let's just be straight. If you want to get funding for a show about dinosaurs, all power to you. Go for it. Like shows get funded all the time. But are you trying to actually fund a solution for a problem? And it just so happens one of the things is a show for dinosaurs in there. That's going to be a totally different thing. You have to pick. And I think this founder is trying to shoehorn in, sort of have their cake and eat it too.
Right. And look, this happens all the time, especially in the early version of pitch decks. Essentially, Ed, you tell me your version, but typically what I get in these early versions is a really broad problem statement that could apply to a million different businesses, and then a highly specific solution, just like this, that solves one tiny bit of that problem. The example I use all the time is at least once a week, I get something that says global warming is a huge problem.
Right.
And then the solution is we have a solar panel that's 40% more efficient. And I'm like, that's amazing. That's great, but it's not going to solve global warming.
Right.
So don't make that your problem. Never have a problem statement that you cannot solve.
I already hearkened to this. Already talked about it. Social media sucks. Okay.
Have you solved all of social media?
Exactly. So you have to make sure that it all lines up. And Will, this is a prime example of a solution looking for a problem, right?
Right.
They say, all right, I want to get this solution funded. So I have a show about dinosaurs and I want funding for it. And I heard out there that investors want to solve problems. So I'm going to now say my dinosaur show solves Hollywood entertainment's problems, hoping that an investor goes, you're absolutely right. But it goes the exact opposite. Investors will see this a mile away and they'll write you off right away.
You just described every crypto pitch ever. Ed, the movie ticketing experience is a nightmare. Enter blockchain. We're putting all movie tickets on the blockchain. Like literally that has nothing to do with movie tickets and it makes no sense and no one will ever use it. But that was always this like weird trick where it was like this bait and switch. In this particular case, if the solution is literally we're going to make a movie, which is cool, which is great, and you've got IP that spans a whole bunch of form factors, talk about the market space for this movie. Say within the sci-fi genre, some of the most successful franchises like Jurassic Park, etc., right, have had both a sci-fi and a dinosaur combo. But currently, there are less than 2 movies or series or no web series or etc. that exist for this genre, despite there being billions of dollars of demand.
Will, what you just illustrated is even solving or a desire for novelty or a supply issue in terms of something that's already successful, that's a valid problem. Hollywood gets investment dollars all the time for this stuff. So you did what I thought we could do was sort of bifurcate how we could go about this, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to summarize what you said. So let's just say the solution, we want to do a story about dinosaurs. And I'm just going to take for granted it's a real cool story about dinosaurs, okay?
Yeah.
So then the problem that we would say is that there's an opportunity that hasn't been filled yet. And like you said, invoke maybe some trends and say, all right, Jurassic World has been really great, but there's no regular television series or, something like that. And get the investor excited and believing that if I made a show about dinosaurs the way that you're intended, it will sell and make me money, which is the whole point of why the investor's there. So what did I miss in terms of how we could change this problem statement to match the solution?
And I'm guessing, and I could be wrong here, but that third bullet point about indie creators lack the visual effects budgets. I think also, by the way, they used VFX. I happen to know what that means, but never use acronyms. Never, ever, 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 ever use acronyms because you're assuming your audience knows as well. But Ed, I think maybe as we get into this deck, maybe what they want to say here is the big blockbusters, the Jurassic Parks of the world, are awesome, but they don't translate economically to smaller opportunities like web episodes or audiobooks, etc. We're going to build a franchise that tackles that big TAM, that big audience buying, but doing it in smaller format areas that are easier to produce and more cost effective.
Great. Okay, now let's flip the switch a second, Will. Let's go back to this thing saying we're an IP hybrid-driven studio. Okay, let's just say they've created a new platform to take stories and put them in books, audiobooks, interactive chatbots. All right. So let's say the problem really is, I don't know, Hollywood is losing billions of dollars a year because they don't know how to translate Hollywood stuff to smaller screens and digestible chunks and everything like that. Then, Will, tell me what you think. The solution would then be, instead of a show about dinosaurs, would be we've created a platform, a software, some type of marketplace to take big Hollywood stories and translate to smaller screens, monetize them, and increase their ROI and their earning power by 10x. That would match then problem solution.
We talked about web series, we talked about book, we talked about audiobook, but at no point did we explain why those are the solution to anything.
This is where I'm going to be, I don't know, maybe, am I being mean with this? I'm not exactly sure. I'm literally going to shut down this pitch deck critique and review because, Will, we're doing it because until you figured out problem solution, that we can't go any further on these pitch decks.
This happens all the time, and this is actually where I start with every founder. When I get on a call with them or I'm just trying to help them out in some way, they said, hey, here's my whole deck, review the whole thing and tell me everything. And I said, I can't. I said, why? I said, because unless I'm 100% sure that you're tackling the right problem, the rest of the deck actually doesn't matter. And 9 times out of 10, it turns out we were going after the exact wrong problem, and the rest of the deck was bunk. So we always start with the problem that is the North Star for the rest of the deck.
And that's why, as Will said, we can scrub decks in 30 seconds because we don't have to scrub the whole deck. If we lose it by problem solution, it's pretty much an academic exercise at that point in time anyway. We know nothing's going to line up and match.
Agreed.
So to this founder, what would you say in terms of what should this founder do in terms of their pitch deck right after they watch this?
The first thing we want to do is we want to, if what we're pitching is a multi-format sci-fi dinosaur movie, then I want to work backward on that. And I want to say, what problem does a multi-format solution solve? Is it a budget problem? Is it because we have to be across multiple channels in order for this to work? And then start to write the problem statement to fix it. Now, Ed, that is literally a solution looking for a problem, but sometimes that works.
Yes, absolutely. That's where pivots come in, and that's where we can iterate on that. My whole thing is, right, you have to pick your identity. Are you trying to solve specifically in terms of an overarching problem that Hollywood has and your dinosaur show is just a case study of it? Mm-hmm. Or do you just want a dinosaur show funded? And that's okay. I cannot translate this enough. It is okay to just want to fund a show like a project. It's not going to be a unicorn platform, and you're not going to get A16Z interested, but you will get Hollywood investors. You'll get entertainment investors. There's always an investor out there for you.
Right.